Good evening, Thomas.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Happy to be here with you.
Yeah.
I had this I had this idea, and it's Christmassy season, so I'm not sure when everyone's gonna be listening to this, but they'll get all the pieces of the puzzle.
Sometimes we need Christmas in July.
That's right. So you know those Christmas villages, those like little porcelain houses and stuff. So I really like them a lot. So I hope to at some point accumulate a village.
Your own empire.
Okay. So it's funny you say that because I was actually like doing a bunch of like YouTube research on like what other people do, and it's quite elaborate. If you look at if you type in largest Christmas village miniatures, you'll see people who are on news stations talking about how they have a problem, and they start like setting it up in October, and they have like 1,000 houses.
Yeah.
That's a little overkill for
Yeah.
me. But so I actually had this idea. I realized that I like to try to find ways to make money off of things I spend a lot of money on. That way it kind of validates me in my own sense.
You can explain it to your wife better.
Yeah, that's right. And it might be an insecurity, but anyway, I have this idea. I was actually talking to somebody at church about it, and she's a planner. Like, she really thinks things through. And she said that I was crazy. And so do you think that I'm crazy? So the best Christmas village houses I have ever seen are in Germany.
Yes, of course.
Christmas Village, Germany. They started
Wunderbar.
Yes, they started it. So I was thinking, I've got this 3D printer. So what if I were to go to Germany, get these Christmas villages, like a couple of sets, and then scan them, and then like print them, paint them, add a couple of little like lights here and there, and then sell them. I think that'd be fun.
I like it. Because you just went public through this podcast, your copyrights are in big trouble.
Yeah.
Make sure you change it at least 20%, then it's yours.
That's a good idea.
You can use them as inspiration, but you did not copy.
Correct.
Identical.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Thank
you
for
made it
that.
your own. You'll make it your own.
So here's the crazy part, because this idea, if we're being honest, rolls out in Christmas of 2026.
Okay.
So
Gonna take a couple years.
I can't go this Christmas. I just can't afford it at the moment. So next year, I go to Germany in Christmas.
Okay.
And the Christmas markets are open. I get a bunch of them, and then I bring them back. And I have the next 8 months to change them, print them, paint them, and then
I love it. I love it.
So it's funny that you say you love it, because she said that was crazy. Like, why would you do something so elaborate? And if we're being honest, we're talking a couple $1,000s at the least.
Yeah, but when the money's rolling in, who will laugh the loudest?
The tens of dollars being brought in.
Well, here's back to our main theme. Would you have fun doing it?
I would.
So there's enough reason right there.
You think so?
Heck, and you might even break even.
That'd be cool. And at the very least, I've got these German villages.
I would go to Cologne. I would go to Berlin, and then certainly Munich.
I was thinking,
and then if you wanted to go, it's not just Germany. Europe in general, Northern Europe in general, has the markets. So
that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That I like that idea. So actually, it's funny. It's funny that you're encouraging it, because I thought I was being really crazy. I was expecting I don't know if that's the best use of your time.
This person could have been paid off by your wife to discourage you from buying plane tickets.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm more of a neutral observer who just wants joy and peace and harmony in your life.
Wow, that's really kind.
Plus, I can see you're excited about the project, so.
That's true. Well, I've got these kind of
I've
obsessions
seen you
all the time.
3D a lot of things.
Yes.
I've seen you 3D a lot of things, and so I think this is probably the more fruitful ones I've ever seen so far. So actually, I think this other person, they've not seen your previous work.
The least of which being what, exactly, in your opinion?
No, they're all awesome. They're all awesome.
Okay. This one's just awesomer.
I mean, I should mention that you have 3D'd your own head.
That's true, yes.
So that's something to think about for folks out there who want perspective. And the head was, by the way, given away as a trophy.
That's right.
For a game that
I don't
think
think it was appreciated as much as I had fun printing it.
No. You'll know with your village, though, because people will buy it or not.
That's true. Well, to everyone listening and watching, welcome to The Sage. Excited to be here. This is round number 2, and we're in the Inklings, the bookstore in Bartow, on top of Unfiltered. So thank you, A-Bear, for
definitely
for
shout
lending
out
us
there,
the space.
right?
This is amazing, the space.
You too could enjoy all this.
That is true.
It's awesome up here.
Yeah.
We're on the 2nd floor, very lofty, open beams, very cool.
And we must not forget...
Exposed brick.
That's
like
right.
real brick. That's not faux brick, people. It's like the real deal.
You don't really get that anywhere these days.
No.
You know, and we must not forget the smartest person in the room, Paul.
Yes.
Thank you, Paul, for
Producer Paul.
Producer Paul for
Also known as Brother Paul.
Yes. Like
we used to call
in a
him,
Christian sense.
We used to call him Saul, and then around the age of 7, he turned a corner.
Yeah.
We gave him a new name.
He almost lost his vision for a little bit, actually.
This was in Ohio after a snowball fight.
That's right. It was a whiteout, so he was maybe just daydreaming, but whatever. So, Robert, what are we talking about tonight?
Yeah, one of the things that I think sometimes the Lord blesses us, and we don't necessarily have the language to recognize what's going on. So, for example, if somebody was to say, you're going to have a mentor, or someone's going to disciple or pour into you, however you want to describe it. And you might say, I don't really have that. Don't really have that. But maybe you have that and you just haven't recognized it as such. So I just want to give a shout out to all the multiple ways that people pour into one another, and how that lifelong, chiseling away at the human heart, it comes from a lot of different places. There's people who you might feel like it somewhat casually for 10 minutes, and you thought you were going into the main room for a church service, and then you look back over your life and you realize, you know what, there was that one person that they would always check in with me for like 5 minutes every Sunday morning. And it doesn't sound very formal, and it doesn't sound like complete, but actually that was really helpful. So I would just, when we talk about what are the different relationships that the Lord uses to chisel away at our hearts, as I said, you think about like there is training times where you have somebody who's probably more of an expert, and they have a very specific thing in mind. And when you hear training, it's like you're getting ready to do something. So when you hear training and then you think, yeah, and then after the training, you won't be doing anything. It's like, no, there's not such a thing. Huh. Training is usually for a specific purpose, and you kind of need an expert. It's not like a good peer-to-peer, laid back, relaxed atmosphere. It's usually like you need to stretch your mind or your body or whatever.
So we are talking about, mentorship, relationships, and that can take many forms. Mm-hmm. So one of the forms that you're saying is almost kind of like a teacher-pupil kind of role. I mean, it's not that strict. It's not necessarily a lecture, but it's intentional. You were here to learn this thing, and as a learner, you just need to soak in as much as possible.
If you were doing student ministry of some sort, and then the person that was investing in you, they were also in student ministry, then there's going to be those kinds of attributes involved, right? And whereas that's not the only thing you need in life, but that's a real specific thing. So it's not to say it's either or, it's all the above, all the above. So for example, if you were going into student ministry and you say, yeah, all the people that have poured into me, not a single one has ever done this work before. I'm like, oh, you might want to look into that, right? Or you say you want to plant a church. Doesn't matter what model or type of church. A good question would be, have you talked to any other church planners lately? So what happens is there tends to be more like skill specific, heart specific to get you ready for a certain something that you're going to get done. And so again, that's not all of it, but that's a sliver of it. Because sometimes if we mix up the words, we might be disappointed because we say, yeah, I met with that guy, but he never taught me how to do student ministry. And it's like, well, maybe he didn't know it was student ministry training. Were we clear on those kinds of things?
So it's interesting. That makes me think of, like in my life, if I have a car issue, there's somebody I know I call about car issues. Hey, I have this.
Blessed are you amongst people if you have a good car person. They're hard to find.
They are, and I should send him cookies or something like that, because just to make sure that he knows.
Influencers you can find. People who know how to fix a car, like in real life, they're hard to find.
So yeah, I guess what I found is like there are different people in my life who are good at doing different things.
Yeah.
And when something like that comes up that's in their wheelhouse, I'll reach out to them. So that would be maybe an example of that kind.
Exactly.
Some of them are in the mentor role.
That's right.
Some of them are more like friends to me.
And it can be formal, it can be informal.
Okay.
Your friend could have a car mechanics class that he does every Monday night, but it's unlikely. The truth is, most people who are good at mechanics is like, yeah, I just grew up around my dad and he knew how to do it, and I followed him and handed him wrenches and screwdrivers when the time was right. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was going through a training process. And then someone might go, well, did it teach you lots of life lessons? And it's like, well, just the general work ethic, I guess, but it's probably more of a specific sliver.
That makes sense.
And so again, it's really not about either or. You need all the above. But the only time we get into trouble is when we have like false expectations, because we go to somebody, somebody goes to college and they say, you know, the thing about that, it's just a piece of paper because it didn't really tell me how to do my job. It's like, yeah. College was never meant to be that, unless you have there's a couple of majors out there, like if you're going to be a CPA or some of the engineering type schools. But for the most part, like liberal arts, it's like, hopefully they just taught you how to do critical thinking, but then you probably still had to figure out how to do your job, and you didn't learn how to do it during your 4 years of college.
Right.
That was not part of the bachelor's program.
Yeah, they don't teach you necessarily some of the practicals because they can't.
Exactly.
You're not doing the work.
And this is where academia and the real world always have troubles crossing, because every now and then someone says, well, we need to help these kids do more of that practical stuff. And I said, well, yeah, it's called Travis Technical School. If you really want to do HVAC, then you should go there. But you could get a 4-year degree and still not know how to do HVAC, or you wouldn't want to trust that person to rewire the electricity in your house, right? Because those are real specific kinds of things. So, so training is one. And then the other would be the whole dynamic of, obviously we're talking about sages out there because we think of them first and foremost, but there also is a place for peer-to-peer where, you need Pauls in your life, the older Paul pouring into Timothy. You also need peer-to-peer, brother to brother, which sometimes can be the hardest because in some ways it requires more relational maturity. Because if you're kind of living in a mindset of, well, you're not the boss of me. Well, you're not the boss of me. When you come as brothers or sisters, just siblings in Christ, there's more of that neutral ground. Like, you're not the expert on this. I'm not the expert on this. But we can bring out the best in each other.
Interesting. So how would you define the difference between commiserating, like we're just
Right.
complaining together,
Yeah, great
and
question.
this is actually productive together, especially if we're both admitting we don't know necessarily.
Yeah. Which brings me to that's a great question, and it segues to another term called coaching, and it depends what people mean by coaching, but a good coaching relationship where you don't just cry in each other and never get anywhere. Commiserating is not actually that helpful. It'll give you a little bit of a feel good because you're like, man, every Monday morning at 7 a.m., that guy meets with me at IHOP, and I cry and I cry and I tell him my burdens. And then it's like 20 years later, you're still crying. You still got the burdens. So you have to end each conversation with, what do you think the Lord wants you to do about it? Just a couple of closing questions like that. It basically, if you and I are doing paddleball, pickleball, tennis, table tennis, it's like, did the ball go back to this person? Because you have to take responsibility for you. Yeah. So if you have a scenario where it's like, yes, and then my mentor fixed my life, it's like, no, mentors, they don't fix your life. Coaches definitely don't fix your life. And even sages, if they're really smart, they don't fix your life. Because it basically, what they do is we're meant to hold up a mirror for one another. And then you walk away and go, you know what? Robert asked me a good question. He said, what do you think you should do about it? And then it got really awkward because it got specific. Because Robert was like, by what time, on what date will you text me to tell me that you have done what? So it's like, It's like, all right, we're going to Europe. We're gonna build an empire of Christmas villages. If you were serious about it, then a good coaching, and rather than commiserating,
Yeah.
I'm broke, I can't do it. Plus, some person told me I was crazy for thinking. Okay, whatever, that's cool. All those could be true. We don't know, but it would be like, all right, well, how much do you need? I don't know. I haven't not really looked at tickets. Okay, when are you going to look at tickets? How much do you need to save? When will you be free? When you can arrange your work schedule. So to avoid commiserating, it wraps up in questions, and you kind of like nail down, I'm going to do
Actionables.
Usually it's really small baby step actionables. It's like crazy specific, because most of us, confession included, the problem is we have grandiose ideas without actually having real small specific things like, did I buy a ticket? Where will I stay in Germany on my trip?
Yes.
And how much material do I have to bring with me on this trip to accomplish what I need to do?
Right.
So that's when you know, oh, this guy's like this is more of a mentor coach. Someone's actually discipling my life, as opposed to a lot of us, especially in the Christian family. Thankfully, there's lots of kind-hearted shepherding types. And so what they'll do is they'll just give you a big hug and let you cry on your shoulder. And like I say, every once a week, you're going to cry on their shoulder. And they're never actually going to challenge you on, hey, honey, do you think you should do something about it? No. Let's revert to our old relationship where I just keep crying and you just keep hugging me. There's a time and a place for the hugging, but that's not actually disciple making. That's not actually bringing out the best in somebody else, and basically saying, you and I both know that the Holy Spirit is in us, right? We are in jars of clay. We have this treasure. So what are we supposed to do to let that out? What part of me is getting in the way? What part of you is getting in the way? And so those are usually where you know the difference between someone you hang out with, someone who is maybe sympathetic, but actually this relationship isn't going to get me where I'm supposed to be.
That's interesting. It kind of makes me think, so we're talking about the peer-to-peer at the moment, but it makes me realize that there are a lot of perceptions that we bring to the concept of mentorship. Something you said made me think about it, like this idea of like, your mentor's not going to fix you, or nor should he think he can. Some people,
if he does, you got the wrong one.
Yeah.
Right?
And that kind of reminds me of the first episode when you mentioned like, if someone's telling you they want to mentor you,
right?
Sometimes that's good.
Consider running,
but like
it could be good, could be legit, but I would consider running.
Usually the good ones aren't gonna say I can help you,
right?
Or at least, how would you say that? How you not?
Well, it's almost a posture of the heart. It's by definition what happens is it doesn't make them qualified or unqualified. But if I'm going to this person, by definition, it's showing humility. It's showing I want to learn. And so if you're, that's why your mom and dad can't pick things for you. And your mentor, the sage, the older brother, can't pick for you. If the older brother is smart, then he recognizes, well, you really only need one character trait, and it would be, I'm not where I want to be. And I think I see some qualities in your life that I admire and seem likely to help me get there. And so that's why almost by definition. So we've used like professor-student relationship as a reference before. The professor, he's paid to be there. He already has a title. He has his name on a desk, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's a bunch of students in the room. And so there's like this given. He's a professor. We're all students. But yeah, he's paid to be here. But again, if one of those students goes, I really enjoy this field, and I would love to pursue it more, and that one student approaches that professor and says that, then that professor goes, wait, all these kids are here, some of them because somebody paid for them to be here. I'm not sure if they really want to be here or not. But this one student, she approached and said, I want to learn more. So again, by definition, the professor didn't get smarter, but that one student is kind of showing that I'm in a place in my life right now. It's important to me. Nobody else picked this for me. Nobody else said, hey, you know what I think? By the way, this happens a lot, actually. It happens quite a bit in my experience. I can, oh man, numbers of times. You've been in the room one or two of the times, and you may or may not notice what was going on. Where somebody might say, hey, Robert, I'd really love for you to mentor this person. Or I'd really like somebody to learn from you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I know. Everybody will say that. Like, could I, by reference, just give you this person? And I'm like, well, actually, there's only one requirement, is that person want this. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It doesn't work. No, your awesome wife, Annie, has never done this. But let's say we're not picking on people if we use ourselves as examples. Let's say Annie is like, hey, Robert, I really need you to help Thomas get his act together. And I'm like, oh, right. That's another.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
the exact
Can you fix
opposite.
him?
Yeah. The exact opposite of that would be, well, Thomas said, I need to work on my stuff. You know?
Yeah.
So almost by definition, that's a
Yeah.
big part of it.
So the journey of pursuing mentorship, the sage, is first being able to acknowledge that you need it or that you want to change.
And that, yeah, because when you say that, you're saying things like, because there's the other thing, just because somebody says it doesn't mean they actually mean it. A friend of mine, he tells good stories about it, but it's basically the idea of when someone comes and says, hey, I want to volunteer with the students at church. Okay. Now, you don't have to put people off, but you don't have to take them up the first time they say that. Maybe they had too much for breakfast. Maybe they had a moving moment in the service. They feel guilty about their lives and they want to. The truth is, if that person means it, they'll be like bugging you several times in a row. No, seriously. Because I don't know if you've ever experienced that, because you've been a student pastor, exactly, right? People who say, I'm going to volunteer. Hey, I'd love to host at my house sometime. And then you realize, I think they must have gone home and talked to their spouse and changed their mind, because like they never approached me again. Again, not that I'm off-putting, not that I say no, but like you just kind of go like, I don't think you really want this, do you? Doesn't every football coach here have like students in PE class and they're like, Coach, next year I'm going to do this, and the coach is like, we meet 6 a.m. If you're serious, show up, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like who's going to show up. But if somebody else signs you up or tries to sign you up, you're not actually saying you're willing to make that, whatever it's going to cost, getting up early or meeting at a stanky IHOP, or whatever it's going to be. You're like, yeah, my wife volunteered me to meet with that guy, or I said yes, but I didn't really know what I was saying yes to.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, so we talked about the teacher type of relationship. We talked about the peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
What are some other types of relationships you think this falls into?
Well, I think there's things happen in group setting more than we realize. So again, as good Western, we happen to be American. I think you're American, although you did recently ask me my ethnicity.
Yeah, like 15 minutes ago.
I didn't know if I was supposed to bring my passport for that or what, but we think very individualistically.
Yes.
Life doesn't work that way for most of the planet today. Never has, never will. We're like the rare breed, and we think we designed the system.
True.
So
do you have your passport on you by chance?
I always have my passport card with me,
so I
can use border state.
If you whatever point, I just love to see it, just to make sure
to verify. But so yeah, I think we often think of mentors. It's only the one-on-one, but I would make an argument for, well, a lot of the good stuff, it can happen in a small group setting. Again, I think I mentioned not long ago, in an overseas setting, if you were in a different culture, you probably wouldn't want to do one-on-one for a lot of reasons, but one of them would be if you poured a lot of time into this one person. Yeah, it's almost like asking for a failure, because if something happens to that one guy, several months or years of work is down the drain. So it's like, why don't you, if there's 2 or 3 that would want to get together, why not meet with 2 or 3? So there are times
yeah.
and places when the one-on-one is great, but then let's not rule out the fact that if you've ever been around a really good person who can lead a small group, or by lead I mean more like facilitate, probably not be the expert, know-it-all teacher, but there's some good stuff that can happen there. And in fact, sometimes it's better, because what'll happen is the really quiet ones are like, thank the Lord I don't have to talk the whole time. But the blabbermouth over here, he asks a lot of questions. I was thinking that question, but I was too scared to ask.
Right.
So you almost can learn a lot because you're in a group setting. And so group settings are not ruled out just because we're Americans who think more individualistically. There's nothing wrong. Again, certain things you almost need one-on-one. A marriage crisis intervention, for example, or again, a pornography setting. And it's like, yeah, we have a co-ed small group, so I'm not sure the whole pornography chat's going to work in our setting.
True.
So there's a lot of things that do need to be one-on-one. You and I mentioned a counselor that we know, mutual friend. And there's a lot of things where I'd say, yeah, probably your best bet for parts of the life, one-on-one with somebody like that. But a lot of it really is often meant to be like 3s and 4s. It could be more than that. If you get too much bigger, it's probably not. A lot of sincere conversations that can happen.
Yeah. It's interesting. It makes me think immediately of like the financial advice of diversify your accounts. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, true.
Although what I feel like is what that analogy fails to do in the groups dynamic is if it's a good group, then those people, those 3, let's say, can actually grow together, and they can grow more rapidly together because they have each other.
That's right. Yeah, actually, so that's why you're exactly right. So because in a particular group setting, it'd be easier to envision there's a guy like Paul, he's maybe older, a sage, and he's pouring in.
Oh, Paul the Apostle.
And him too. Both of them, really. But then at the same time, there's also peer-to-peer mutual stuff going on. And then, of course, in the body of Christ, it's like, yeah, but even if you're a brand new Christian and you've only known the Lord for a week, guess what? You're still one baby step ahead of the 16-year-old in the church family who's looking at you. So there's no such thing as like, you sit and be idle. I'll pour into you for a couple of months. And then if you pass my course, then we'll graduate you and let you do stuff. It's like, no, it's always all the above. Multiple relationships from multiple angles. I need people that are older than me, younger than me, same as me. To whatever, at least I should say, I need to be open to all those relationships. Whether or not you have them and whether or not you feel like they're there, you can take that up with the Lord. But see the value in all of them, I'd say. It
takes a village to raise people.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah. we kind of mutually raise each other. Right?
Yeah. And it doesn't stop when you turn 18.
No.
I hope not.
That's probably a low point, actually. That's probably the pit.
Was 18 a low point for you?
No. No. But I was a Doogie Howser, so I was almost done with college.
But what's the Doogie Howser? I've never heard this before.
Have you not? Oh, no. Man, we're going to have to cut out this whole section. Sorry. That was a dated reference. So there was my gosh. So there was a show 1 billion years ago. It was before Seinfeld even.
Oh, wow.
1 billion years ago. And it was about a kid who graduates from school really young. I think, and he goes to medical school and he's not shaving yet, that kind of thing.
Nice. Oh, yeah.
So at 8.
Was his name Doogie Howser?
Yeah.
Was his first name Doogie?
I think maybe select friends would call him Doogie. Yeah.
If we pay Paul enough money, we could probably get him to put a graphic or something in there.
Yeah. But yeah, what do we mean when you were invited to say yes? What were you saying yes to? And I'll at least give a teaser tonight.
Yeah.
Were you given the option, if you'd like to not go to hell, raise your hand? Okay, we'll count that as a salvation conversion. We have a new one in the family. And then we celebrate, and you're going to be in a newsletter and yada, yada, on and on. Or was it much closer to say what the first century believers would have shared, which was, the God of all history, he wants a people for himself. He's been working from day one. It's come to its fullness. And he is inviting you to be part of his family, and he's got plans, and he's doing a new heaven and a new earth. So I don't want you to just say, let's not go to hell and let's go to this far away, distant place called heaven. Mm-hmm. But I'm inviting you, like the both and, like heaven is now and later. Right. Like, what does that look like? So were you invited to that?
Yeah.
Are we invited to eternal life? Is now. It's different later, but it is now.
Yeah.
It's not like, man, we just survived a political process, by the way. Congratulations to you and all of us who've survived.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's certainly much more fun to watch college football without the commercials. But yeah, if you think about like the angst of, man, a lot of believers, it's like, this world's so screwed up. Man, I just can't wait to leave it.
Yeah, that's true.
I want to leave it personally, or I can't wait for Jesus to come back and just flush it all down the toilet. And it's like, wait a second, is that what it says? is that really what it says? Is that what?
Yeah.
New heaven, new earth is what he's working on. So again, when you come to faith, there's nothing wrong with the simplicity of a child saying, it's true, I don't want to go to hell. And I do think Jesus is the only way. So it doesn't make any of those things untrue.
Yeah.
But it is sad that for most people, they checked that one little box and they thought that was complete life. And nobody ever bothered to tell them, like, well, that was maybe a start.
Yeah.
It certainly is not you're done. And it certainly isn't going to lead to like a full life. It's a very sad life, right? Because again, you're mad at your neighbors because they're horrible people, and you're mad at the process, and you're maybe mad at God for delaying. What's this hold up, And the Lord's like, what part of me inviting you into my process did you sign up for? Like however many years you got on this earth, you said yes to that, right? And however many years I arranged my kingdom, and what does the new heaven and new earth look like?
So there's two questions I have. The first one, are there other types of relationships and that we can talk through? But then also it would behoove me to address, and maybe if we pay enough money to Paul, the chart, the friend chart or the relationship chart. And maybe you're drawing from that, and maybe there's other types of relationships, but would love to talk about that also. I mean, don't want to jump the gun.
Jump ahead to the friend chart. Yeah, well, again, I think the main mindset would be don't pigeonhole to like a certain age bracket. Like, this person has to be older. They may or may not be. Think of this: if you had to be older, and a missionary who's 35 years old goes to most of the planet, by definition, hopefully he feels the freedom to speak to people that are slightly older than him, because he's mostly viewed as a child himself, right? So Paul told Timothy, hey, don't let your youth stop you.
Yeah.
So Timothy was given assignments beyond his age bracket, what you and I would say, he's a wise old sage, let's throw him in there. And Paul's like, yeah, Timothy's young, but he's the guy I need in there. He's wise enough. He's what I'm looking for.
And for the early church, that would have been
a
really big deal.
I mean, yeah, and how, Paul, it's like, when I need to send in the A team, hey, Timothy, can you come over here? I'm leaving this church, and can you come here? Can you come there? So let's not pigeonhole like an age bracket. And then let's not pigeonhole the fact that sometimes it's formal, sometimes it's informal. Mm-hmm. I would say, though, for ourselves, formal and informal is like expectations you might place upon others. But just in our own lives, maybe intentionality is a key. So there's a lot of people that are pretty good. If we think of discipling, I like to say it that way when possible. Disciple making sounds like a verb. It sounds maybe a little more of aggressive, like a chisel and hammer. Like, I'm gonna make a disciple out of you, whether you like it or not. You sorry, it's discipling is more like I don't know what the Lord has for you, and it requires a little more finesse and a little more listening and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are people who are discipling. They are very intentional, and you may or may not recognize that's what they're doing. Like they're just constantly discipling.
Yeah.
Because even every conversation, if you think about it, it's bare bones. Every conversation is a potential discipling moment. Um, if you think of it in that sense, we are all, as followers of Jesus, we are all counselors. A lot of us aren't going to meet with Darren Saley. His phone number is dot, 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 or other great counselors. But who do we counsel? Well, we're painting a building, and this guy's having trouble with his live-in lover, and he's sputing with you.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, Thomas, guess what? I know you don't feel like a trained psychiatrist, but that's okay because you're the guy on the scene. One of my son's friends is a bartender, and I joke, I'm like, yeah, he probably sees more patients than any counselor in town, right?
Yeah.
Because actually, I think it came up because we discussed, like, is it good money? And then we discussed his personality, and I'm like, oh yeah, he probably makes pretty good money because you're like, yeah, the drink was $5, but make it around 100. And I'm like, yeah, he gets paid cash on the spot. He gets like.
So would you say like potentially a good missions field is to be a bartender?
That's a good potential. The only thing you do have to weigh, and I think it's got potential.
Yeah.
But of course, this is meant because you and we're basically the Howard Sterns of Christian world. So we're here to shock and dismay people. You would have to weigh the pros and cons of but then there was a lot of people who got drunk, and then 2 of them did wrap their car around a tree that night. So you have to weigh. But certainly being in those environments. By the way, the only reason why I bring that up is somebody who lives nearby. He used to play in a band, and he told me he got tired of being in the band because he goes, basically, I'm just playing music to help people get drunk by. So he came to. So each person has to listen to their conscience, and he's like, yeah, on the one hand, that sounds cool. And if God says, I want you to do this band and I want you to play this, then that's between you and the Lord. But for this guy, he was like, I realized these people, I'm really not bringing much value to their life. Of course, maybe he wasn't playing in the right honky tonks, maybe he should be at different settings. But certainly in those environments, Neil Cole, a guy who we reference in some of this stuff here. Neil Cole, shout out to Neil Cole, but Life Transformation Groups is his, what he refers to as a small grouping of people that, they definitely are not thinking in terms of who's the expert, who's not. It's definitely meant to be, hey, peer to peer, could be same age. I've been a Christian 1 week longer than you. Okay, that's enough. That's all we got. Let's do it. But he used to say, you sometimes have to sit in the smoking section if that's what you want to do. You have to be willing to be in environments where people are hurting and messed up and life is a little not clean and perfect. Obviously you have to be wise about that, but at the end of the day, if you ignore the rough sections of society, then what are we talking about here?
Right.
You only have like a few pristine environments where, it just doesn't really work
that's
that
so
way.
funny that you say that, because I have all these flashbacks as a kid, and I'm not really sure if my parents put any kind of parameters around me, but I just remember like being the kid who was like, oh, I don't know if I should hang out with that kid because
right.
his dad smokes cigarettes. And I may have like policed myself, but that's certainly
we all have, and hey, those of you who are judging out there, you quit judging. You quit judging because you do the same thing. No, we all, we instantly go to a self-righteousness.
Yes.
And when I say that, I mean, of course, it's easy pickings to go, oh, part of the churchy crowd, very self-righteous, right? But all aspects of society, there's a lot of self-righteousness going on. I once threw an aluminum can in the non-recyclable, and the judgment that poured upon me. So we all have things where we really, it doesn't take much to set us off. It should kind of like be like a mirror to kind of go, yeah, that shows the sinfulness of my heart. Like I'm easily offended how people drive in traffic. I'm easily, oh, I can't believe that guy. I can't believe that guy. I can't believe that guy. And it's like, yeah, that's cool, Robert. That kind of like crowds out your ability to like pay attention to yourself and go, oh, that guy's driving just like me. I mean, that's what makes it so annoying.
Yes.
Or he has a different vice, but let's not talk about my vice, like.
True. Yeah. So I suppose what one person might say is, oh, I don't like that person because they have this addiction. It's like, oh yeah, well, you're gossiping. So
right. Well, right. Exactly.
You're addicted to gossip.
Yeah. Gossip is this. It's not gossip when you're there to help in some way. You're like, if two brothers, you and producer Paul have several siblings.
Smartest man in the room.
So if a couple of brothers are having a conversation because you need to do an intervention with one of the other siblings, that's not called gossip. That's called game plan. That's called, right?
Right.
By the way, full disclosure, pastors do it all the time. If you're on staff at a church and you're like, yeah, I just got a call, like, yeah, he hit her, so we got to do something. That's not called gossip because we're part of the solution. We're going to have to be the ones to do something about this, right?
Yeah.
So it's if you're willing to be part of a solution, then you're not gossiping. But yeah, more often than not, the other 99.9% of it is like, well, yeah, it's for sport. And actually it taps into that self-righteousness of us to say, oh, look at them, look at them, look at them.
Yes. I'm not that way.
And again, I wish I wish that it is fair that the church deserves whatever critique or people that from a church are in your eyes hypocritical or whatever. But I'm like, have you been in society much? Like it's the human condition. It's not, we don't corner the market. We haven't cornered the market. But so the inverse of that would be discipling is the lifestyle of wisely being willing to sit in the smoking section, to consider what environments are so jacked up that you should be there. You probably need a game plan. I know some guys, they're all bad examples because like they would hang out in certain environments and I'm like, yeah, the environment changed you. You never changed it. There's a difference between intentionality and just hanging out.
That's actually a good point because there are times where, and this is good for people who are considering discipleship as a way of life. Like, let me disciple people, not like the kind that are going to say, I'm going to find that person. I'm going to tell them that I can fix them.
That's right. Well, I would say they're not that because they're just saying, I want to be in that environment and I want to be available to people.
Yeah.
And then the truth is, if the guy at the bar punches you, then don't be surprised. That's you set that up.
But it was interesting that you say that because I think about a number of times in my life where I thought I was actually helping somebody, but it turns out all that happened was I got brought into their chaos.
That's right. Yeah.
And you're like, I didn't fix them. I didn't help them really. I just started enabling the behavior unintentionally.
I'll use hyperbole. Jesus used hyperbole a lot. Exaggerate, because when you exaggerate, it makes the point more clear.
That actually may insult some people or offend people. So, give us a good example.
We lived in Amsterdam for several years. That's where my kids grew up, and YWAM had quite a ministry in the red light district. And actually, one of our teammates, Martha Pilgrim, shout out if you're still out there. Probably wouldn't listen, but you should. You should listen more, Martha. But she was on those teams, and the red light district, prostitutes, what do you do, etc. But if you think about all the precise, very well thought out process of what they were doing, it was we go out in pairs. Before we go out in pairs, we meet at this neutral location. First of all, because all of our valuables will go into a locker because we're not going out there with a wallet. We're not going to have a nickel on us when we go out there because you're just asking for trouble. And we're going to spend time in prayer. Like as if we're going into a battlefield, right? So when I think about like how YWAM would like be very precise in, we're going into a challenging environment.
Mm-hmm.
We're not whistling and walking through the doors and being like, "Hey, I'm here to do bar ministry tonight." It's like, yeah, let me know how that goes. Let me know how that goes. So yeah, I think that intentionality, because then you do say, well, the weapons of war, the weapons of a spiritual battle. What would you want on you if you were going into this, as opposed to, yeah, I'm going to hang out there and I'm going to be a good influence on them. And it's like, yeah, I don't see it. Honestly,
So-
I've never, most of those people don't come back, honestly, I mean, for the most part.
So, okay, that's very fascinating to me because the difference between, that's a very extreme example, a very good example, but applicable. So like in my example, when I think about some individuals who I ended up just getting sucked into their chaos, I was doing it on my own. I was going solo, and they had a lot of issues that I definitely couldn't necessarily help. So I wasn't necessarily prayed up. I wasn't necessarily had other people around me to keep me anchored.
Right.
And so like, yeah, I guess the thing, like in the red district, there's so many temptations that are asking for your attention.
And when do you know it's time to clock out and
Yes.
and be like Jesus, sneak away and spend extended times in prayer away from the chaos?
Right.
But by the way, that was another part. They would describe like now these guys, they lean more towards a certain band in the faith, but they would be like, I have to get out of this town.
Yeah.
I need a 4-day weekend out of this town to get my head back on straight. So they took it very seriously because they'd seen other people and how over time it's like the cumulative beat down.
Yep.
So yeah, wisdom things like going in pairs, wisdom things like getting prepared, and wisdom things like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to be intentional, I'm not going to get caught in the chaos, and at this time I'm going to leave, and I will immediately text my wife and say, okay, thank you for praying, I'm now out of, so just knowing what those kind of limits might look like, just depending on what we're talking about. We're kind of talking in vagaries, but I'm kind of glad about that because it applies to a lot of different things.
True.
It could apply to, I don't know, a youth pastor who's surrounded in the youth world 24/7, and I'm like, I'm not sure that's going to be the best thing for you. Or it could be a particular ministry where you're like, yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on there.
Yeah.
How do I know I don't become part of it? What does that look like?
True. Thank you for sharing that. Also, this is not a vague question, but a specific question. What are some times that you feel like Jesus is hyperbolic?
Gouge out your eye, cut off your arm.
Yeah, I guess the other thing would be, I think of like the twig in your eye, the log in yours.
Yeah, you don't have. I mean, there's no such thing as literally have a telephone pole in your eye, but it's told as such to kind of drive home the point. The hyperboles are usually like, hey, that gray area that you don't think applies to you, and you're like, well, but Thomas does it. He gets away with it. He's fine with it. So it can work for me. And then the Lord's like, I'm not talking about Thomas right now, right? Well, what about, remember, Peter says, well, what about John? Like, how's he going to die? That's a cold-blooded question for a brother to ask. Hey, man, I gotta, you just gave me a rough future ahead. What about that guy? Seriously? If I want that, what happens to that guy is between me and him. What happened? I'm just talking to you. So yeah, we live in this tension of we need to be willing to be in difficult scenarios amongst difficult relationships around difficult people, but we also have to be discerning to recognize when is too much for me. And in certain environments, too much for me might look different than somebody else.
So then let's take a couple minutes and define, at least in broad terms, the kinds of relationships that we generally experience. I guess that would be the friendship grid. Cue Paul. Mm-hmm. I give you $10 or something like that. Just put the graphic up.
Wow, $10.
Is that too much?
That's a couple drinks here at this fine establishment.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Why not?
Yeah. So I've been kind of leading to this. I really, really like this chart because for me, I like boxes
Mm.
and I like kind of categorizing things, and so it's meaningful to me. And I know if my wife were to hear me say that, she'd say, "So you do like personality tests," which I don't. I very much don't like them. Which
We'll take that as a yes, that you love them.
Okay.
That you love being pigeonholed.
So the friendship grid.
So there's people who pour into me and they may not get much out of me.
Yeah.
Right? Am I going the right direction?
Yeah. And so I suppose that could be classified as like a lecturer or a coach teacher type role.
Or
The teacher's
the
not.
professor once again.
Yeah.
He's the professor. I hope he doesn't show up to work every day and go, man, I hope the students bring me joy. It's like that sad thing when you see like a parent who needs their kids to give them love and approval and whatever. And you're like, well, it doesn't work. It's not supposed to work that way.
Yeah.
Thank God my parents didn't live like that. But there's the relationships where it is mutual. And you say, man, I like hanging out with them. They like hanging out with me. It could be a mutual life transformation group situation. And if somebody goes, well, who's really like in charge, or who's the boss, or who's the more spiritually savvy sage? And the honest answer is we're just brothers and sisters in Christ. Like, we're equal.
Yeah.
There are times when you recognize the other relationship has been flipped, and let's say it's a ministry situation, and you're going to pour, and you're not going to see anything back in return. And then the one that is like surprisingly the don't spend most of your life there is the I'm okay, you're okay. They used to call it the OK Corral. I didn't make that up. That's in Psychology 101 books. But in the OK Corral, it's just people that like you don't really grow much. You just kind of spend time together. You just kill time together is better to say, right? And you'd say, yeah, is it bad? Is it unpleasant? No, it's not bad. It's not unpleasant per se. Yeah, but it's just like literally a way of passing time. And you say, he's not getting anything out of it. He's not growing. I'm not getting anything. I'm not growing. This is us mutually wasting each other's time, isn't it? And sometimes actually that can be certain friends when you're like, yeah, they're a lot like this person might be a lot like me, right?
Yeah.
So there's just like, yeah, we're just like two people hanging out, killing time.
That's interesting. It makes
Spend less of your life in those.
I imagine there are a lot of, and I'm going to call a lot of people out. There's a lot of people who have friends online through video games.
Sure.
And not that there's anything inherently wrong with video games.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, Seinfeld says.
I guess what that strikes me, the way you say that, is like that's probably that's probably the easiest place that I can think of for those kind of relationships to start.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I think we mentioned last time, Tall Skinny Kiwi, you're out there. He's real big into meeting people and hit online churches. And I mean, he wouldn't even use the word online. That's I'm dating myself to call it online church. I don't have the wherewithal to see what beautiful things are happening. So sometimes that needs to happen, and that's beautiful, and that's awesome. I think I mentioned, we have quite a few teams that are, you're interacting with folks and they live in Tehran, and that is the only interaction they're going to get. They're not going to get face-to-face. And so that's actually where they can go and ask questions and not get beheaded, So when it's there, that's awesome. But yes, certainly that can be a less than ideal, but we can do it with technology or without technology. I mean, people have been doing it for years. It's just technology allows a whole other realm of it.
What do you think would be some non-technological ways of those relationships happening, like the passing of time, sort of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think, the questions to ask would be, am I growing being around this? And, often the answer would be no. And then am I helping this person or this group grow? And often the answer is no.
Mm.
And so at what point are you willing to say, well, then let's call it what it is. It's called just killing time, you know? And again, that's going to happen. That's going to be in your life. Maybe you're on a painting crew and there's some painting crews and you're like, yep, it's kind of like what it is. Like sometimes there's great chemistry and you're like, man, it's fun. Like we're interacting, we're discussing marriages and talking to each other off the ledge. And there's like a positive thing going on. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you're like, nope, we're just painting. I mean, like there's nothing, praise God, there's nothing bad going on. There's nothing really good going on.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with those moments. But when you recognize a good chunk of your life is spent in those moments, don't go out of your way to intentionally be in there. It would be similar in a weird way almost. There's a couple, and they're kind of a couple, but there's no plans for moving forward, getting married. They've been engaged for 10 years.
Yes.
Right? Engaged for 10 years. Right?
Yeah. And that's not too uncommon
engagement
these
is a way of saying stuck. It's a nice word of saying stuck.
Yeah.
Right? So so if in that scenario it becomes more obvious where you might go, that's bad. Like you should let her leave you because maybe she could find somebody who's going to do something with life. Right? Like, and so if somebody goes, well, at least she has a shoulder to cry on. At least she has somebody.
Yeah.
At least there's, it's like a placeholder. So you're holding on to this placeholder, and then the Lord is looking at your life and going, I don't want you to have a placeholder. Remove the placeholder because that void is supposed to be primarily the Lord himself. But then in his good time, when he provides someone, it would be like, yeah, he brings out the best in you. She brings out the best in you. Now we're getting somewhere.
So what would you say to the people who might think like, no, this couple, they really do bring the best out of each other. And the reason why they're not married is because they've had bad marriages in the past and they don't want to make that mistake again, but they're good for each other. What would you say to maybe someone who would...
Yeah, I would avoid like black and white answers because, again, back to my whole thing, like a good mentor doesn't tell you what to do. He just holds up a mirror and goes... By the way, I'm thinking of a few times, but one of them, they were in their 60s, and they were doing that, living together, not even pretending to be engaged. They were just no plans to ever marry. They'd already been married before, done that, tried that, and they were done. And actually, I didn't do it. I wasn't brave enough, but a mutual friend, shout out Hal Haller. We see you
Brave
out
man.
there.
Brave man.
He asked the guy, like, what would she say if you asked her to marry you? And the guy, it was funny because as Hakuna Matata as he was like, oh, that would really mean a lot to her. She would really love that. And then the follow-up question is like do I really have to ask this? It's like, should you consider that more? By the way, they're married now. They're now in their 70s.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it was to be a phenomenal thing. I won't shout out their name because I don't want to embarrass them. But yeah, at the time, they would have said, hey man, just leave well enough alone. We don't want to mess with it for a host of reasons. I get it. And that's cool. If checking off days on your calendar until you die is your thing, then that's awesome. I'm not here to take that away from you. But if I was if I was trying to be positive in your life, I'd probably ask you some questions and be like, hey, how about let your yes be yes and your no be no? How about like if you have a friend, let them know that they mean something to you. And if you have an enemy, fine, say so. Be like the psalmist. Yeah. But don't just be hanging around people acting like they don't mean anything. Like that apathy. It's almost like an apathy, right? So you're in apathetic relationships. You don't care one way or the other. You are an agnostic. You're not a God follower. You're not an atheist. You're just like I don't know and I don't care. And I'm like, it's pretty lazy. Make up your mind. I would feel better if you just make up your mind. Either curse God and die or embrace him. But like, I don't understand why you're just twiddling your thumbs, wasting your life. So again, by the way, that we're not describing a small sliver of society. I think there's a lot of people that kind of live that way.
I think so. Well, so here's my question for you. And this is probably, hopefully, probably, who knows? I ask
Who
a lot
knows?
of questions. This might be my last question, but there's certainly, I know in my life, times and circumstances where, so the grid, right? So there are times where there are relationships where I think these people are speaking into my life, but it's actually more of a peer-to-peer. There's times where like I think this person's a peer, but actually it's someone who's in the apathetic camp. Like, hey, this is the no-go corral. What's it called?
The okay corral.
The okay corral. Like,
I'm okay.
hey,
You're
maybe
okay.
you're there and there.
Neither of us is going to grow or change.
And there are times where like I think I'm helping somebody, but I'm actually not helping them at all. And then times where maybe I even have someone in the okay corral who actually could be a very good peer or even a good mentor. So I think as much as it's helpful to categorize, and I think everyone who's listening can like put pieces together. This person kind of belongs here, and this person goes here. And there's certainly people in our lives who we think are in one camp or are in another camp who should be in a different one. What are some ways that we can think more critically on that, and how do we get people in the right corral it for
Yeah,
lack
that's
of better
good.
terms?
That is good. And I think of like just questions that might help us sort it out. So I think I'm helping this person, but maybe I'm deluding myself. Well, I mean, did they ask for this relationship? Back to my original, this is why you ask a mentor, the mentor doesn't ask you. Now, of course, there are times when you're like, yeah, I'm paid to be a youth pastor, and these 50 kids, I feel a responsibility for them, and I don't know which ones appreciate it, which ones don't, so that's different.
Yeah.
But like, would this person, let's say I'm giving free unsolicited advice, and I realize, you know what? This is me doing pearls before swine, right? That's a great Bible metaphor. I'm throwing pearls before swine. They're not listening. They didn't ask for it. I should probably just try to shush as much as possible because they're not asking. They're not looking for this. There are times when you're confident. You're like, well, I'm hopefully bringing Christ into this room, even though they may or may not appreciate it. That's different. But when you realize you're pouring your time and energy into someone who's like, you're like just pouring into a sieve. There's times when you go, you know what would be better? I need to learn to back off because what I'm doing is I'm feeding into this gives me meaning and I'm creating this grandeur idea of who I am. So yeah, it would be the question of, does this person really want this awesome advice I'm giving them? Did they actually ask for that? And people usually don't hold up a sign or state it clearly, in the English language, but you can tell. Did they? Every day we paint together, and I'm giving you cheap advice on how to be a better husband towards your wife. Come to think of it, when's the last time you actually asked for that? Or I could tell you were listening, or that you didn't just your eyes roll in the back of your head. So that picking up on those things.
What would you say to like one of the examples we said was parents and how they can sometimes, some parents can look for validation and approval from their children, which you said is, you kind of basically said like, that's dangerous. And so how would, if that's the case, if there's a parent out there who struggles with that, how might they overcome that? God is
the only one that keeps the scorecard. He's the one that gives applause. So he says, you're doing the right thing. She's throwing a tantrum. And it looks like you're doing nothing right now, but you're here to please me. And I'm pleased with what you're doing. Whether the child appreciates it right now is immaterial. And that's hard to do, of course. It's very hard to do. But that is what the crux of envisioning is. You start a day and you say, Lord, I leave it at your feet. I don't know if it's going to feel like we're making any progress today or this month or this year, but I'm not here for that. I do ask, Lord, encourage me, show me some signs that maybe we're getting there. But I know that I can't insist on that being my reward of, I did good today, or I know I must have done the right thing. So, yeah, the Lord is the only one that I'm here to please him. And he's in this for the long game. He's in for the long game of, again, this child is a future leader in the church. This child is somebody who will pour into the lives of a lot of other people.
Yeah.
So today they're a horrible child. They're behaving like a horrible child, perhaps. But I'm looking for 10 years from now, 20 years from now. These people will help pick out my nursing home one day, right? So I need them to have wisdom and discernment.
Yeah.
So it's the long play.
That makes sense. I've been considering the OK Corral, that final bracket, and
trying to break out of the OK Corral.
Yeah, I gotta get out.
How do you break up with that 10-year engagement that's not going anywhere?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of camps. One is like my question would be, how do we determine if someone belongs there or not? And by belong there, we mean that relationship should probably cease. Mm-hmm. And so if the question is if we're motivated to want to put ourselves around good people, then the OK Corral is a place we don't want to be. So what are some questions we can draw out from people to determine if they belong there or not? Mm-hmm. One question that came to my mind is like, well, I guess one thing is you said those actionable steps. So hey, if it's a commiserate sesh, if it ends with so what are you going to do about that? Then pretty quickly, like probably nothing.
This person just uses me to whine.
Yeah,
and I'm actually in a sick way feeding into it. I think the other thing is to think of is not necessarily in the negative, but in the positive. Do you and I envision a world where there's nobody else out on the planet who actually would genuinely welcome a good friend? So I think there's billions of those out there. So knowing that there's billions of those out there, it's like, so every 5 minutes that I squander in, another stupid Saturday night doing nothing meaningful with this person is another opportunity where I could have poured into something else, someone else.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's similar, the reference is, shake the dust off, because it's not like a screw you, I hate you, I condemn you. It's really just an understanding of, man, the Lord is so awesome. He's got good stuff. Surely there's other people who want to hear about him.
Yeah.
Surely there's other people who want to talk about him. Surely there's other people who want to allow him to change who they are. Okay, I'm looking for those kind of people. And looking for those kind of people means very mature Christians, people whose lives are really messed up today. It's a full gamut. They can be anywhere on that spectrum. I don't care. I'm not judging where they are on the spectrum. I'm like, the difference is when they think about the things of the Lord, they're like, yeah, let's dive into that some more. And then there's other people that are just not interested. So it's not so much a negative towards them, but it's just like we have troubles with this because we have a hard time with the idea of like being exclusive, right? So if you think about it traditionally a marriage is very exclusive by nature.
Yeah.
Forsaking all others. Well, wait, why do you have to say you hate other people to show your love for Annie? It's like, I'm not sure you understand what I'm saying here. Thomas only gets one Annie, right? That's a very personal, private, reserved relationship. I only get one Julie, right? That's it. So that's very exclusive. It's very like saying no to other people. Yeah, it kind of is, right? Yeah, that's right. And because that's the way it's. I have to say no to lots of things in order to lift up the meaning of this relationship.
Yes.
So if I am hanging out in a lot of relationships that are just blah, not really doing anything, that it is the equivalent of, rather than marrying Annie, you're dating casually 5 other people, and you're just like, Thomas, what are we doing?
What meaning is there?
What meaning? Yeah, what meaning is? It's funny because we're using this as examples of a lot of other relationships, but the truth is, I just described like many, many, many people, right? Like when I say casually dating other people, and it's not going anywhere. We know it's not going anywhere. A true friend would just tell you right up, like, what are your intentions? What's the plan? Oh, there's no plan. Oh, okay. Well, that's what Robert and Thomas were talking about the other night. Like you're just hanging out. Like you're just killing years for one another.
Right.
So yeah, it's we usually think of being exclusive or having the elite Annie in your life or the elite Julie in my life. It's like somehow downgrading these other people. And it's like, no, that's the nature of life itself. Every hour you waste there, every time you say yes to something dumb you're not supposed to do means you get home an hour later and Annie's like, where is he? In your case, she's flying a plane somewhere right now and she doesn't even miss you.
Well, I hope she does.
But if she wasn't flying a plane and she was at home right now and you and I were just, I don't know, chain smoking.
As we do.
As we're prone to at times. Then it's like, yeah, me and Robert, we killed the evening together. And your wife should rightly be like, well, why not me? Like, you said you wanted to, like, on the quadrant, you have me, you can invest in.
Yeah.
An internal investment.
That's true. So I suppose, in summation of our conversation tonight, there are many different types of relationships that God uses to help develop us. And whether that's through specific coaches and teachers, professors, whether that's groups, or whether that's peer-to-peer, and then quadrant, Q the grid.
For $10, right? You did say $10.
That's right. I do owe him $10 now, darn it. Why did I commit to that? Why do I do this?
We'll steal 2 drinks on the way out.
So like determine in your life where the people in your life fit in that quadrant.
Yeah.
Some people belong in the box that you put them. Sometimes those people might not belong in those boxes. But we can all agree the OK Corral is the place you want to either move people out of or put people in, depending on how valuable, how the kind of value you can bring to them and the kind of value that they can bring to you.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great summary. Great summary.
Cool.
And because I think it does 2 things. If any of us are getting judgy and we're thinking, no, it has to look like this, like specifically discipling looks like this. It's like, no, that's one sliver of it, right? Like, yeah, you do the one-on-one at the IHOP, but I've been to your church on Sunday. It sucks to be there. It sucks. So trust me, my friend, you're one sliver, it ain't getting it there. Or, you're a house church person, or you go to a larger gathering, or whatever or you maybe have a specific type of material and you have like a 16-week program or whatever. It's like, well, those are all good. They can all be potentially good. So I think part of our, hopefully, if nothing else came across, is maybe a little more welcoming understanding that the Lord uses all of those. And then also at the same time to be an encouraging word to say, well, at its most simplest form, you and I actually aren't selling a 16-week program. You're selling the Christmas Villages from Germany,
right.
but that's totally,
right.
totally
Shout
different.
Out Salvation Tommy, my Venmo.
Salvation Tommy.
You can pre-order now.
Venmo me now because you can order before I even make them.
I'm trying to save money to go, so this would be really good for me.
But I would hope that this conversation is encouraging to people because they might go, oh, I'm not really discipling anybody, or I'm not capable of discipling anybody, or I'm not qualified. And again, if you think about some of the things we talked about, it's like, okay, well, if it freaks you out to call it discipling, that's cool. Let's just call it show up at your church gathering spot at least 2 minutes early. I know, people, I don't mean to rock your world. And just be present when you're there. Rather than going, well, one guy's going to give a sermon and we're all going to sing some songs. And then we're going to run out of the building just as fast as we ran in.
Right.
Right? As opposed to the simplicity of someone who goes, no, you know what? It's true. I really care about, I should probably, when I say to these people, how are you doing? I literally, my posture should say, I'm standing here listening. Like, I'm okay for the long version. And if somebody is a school teacher and they're like, man, I'm not disciple making like I know I'm supposed to. And I was like, really? You're around second graders all day long, right? Like every conversation, every smile on your face, every gesture. If you are painting and you're like, dang it, I hate painting. It's not a ministry. It's just boring work. It's a grind. And it's like, hey, it's also like some of the best discipling I've ever been around. I mean, you're trapped in a room, you're sniffing fumes, everyone's feeling good.
Much like a bartender.
It's a legal bartender.
That's
you
right.
will not get a DUI.
It's a productive bartender.
It's a productive bartender. But yeah, hopefully if nothing else, this conversation has shed a little encouraging light on the fact that some folks that you and I are around are actually doing a great job discipling others, even if they never would have called it such.
Yes.
And then others of us probably need to be just like a simple tweak of like, I need to be more intentional about that. I mean, I'm on a work site yakking with people all day long about stupid stuff. It would only take a slight tweak to probably it starts with adding that very simple. Again, I'm big on questions, but how's it going? Like if you just said, you're the weird guy at work who actually says, how you doing? And like literally cares. Very rare breed, by the way, because you have to if you take the time to listen to a response. Most people who talk, they're yakking and they're just yakking about whatever, but very few people will actually, how's your heart? What's going on? And then not like in I'm forcing you have to give me an answer. The first time you might pee in your pants and freak out and be like, oh my gosh, that really creeped me out. He asked me how I was doing. And in America, this just doesn't happen at my job site, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully folks out there are seeing that it's not probably grand gestures like quitting your job and going into the ministry. There's a camera here, so I did air quotes for a reason. Or I'm going to go off to seminary, or I'm going to, whatever. Those are all great things. You and I have done some of those kinds of things with our lives.
Yeah.
But usually, we overestimate what that looks like, and we underestimate the kinds of things that Jesus would typically point out, which would be like, she served me a meal. That was awesome.
Yeah.
She gave 2 little mites. That was awesome.
Yeah. She gave me some extra clothes.
She gave me clothes. Exactly. So probably in the simplicity of wherever we find our lives right now. And if you don't know, to start it off with a prayer and say, Lord, I feel like I'm in a dumb dead-end job, and I feel like I'm in a dumb purposeless existence, and I wish I could do something grand for you. I just want to do something big. And just throw it at him. How would the psalmist throw that at him? The psalmist was pretty vocal about these things. And then probably the response is going to be like, it's really small, simple, changing of your perspective, listening to me more. And the truth is, I've surrounded you. You might not even need to go to the bar or become a bartender. You're probably already surrounded by like a lot of people. But some of them are ready to listen, and some of them aren't.
Right.
So.
Thank you. And hopefully, we surround the people who want to listen and are humble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know. We hope
yes.
There's 1 or 2 out there.
Yes, and there most certainly is.
Most certainly.
Most certainly. Well,
that's Paul's department, right? The actual getting it out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I don't know where those people are, but I hope it finds them. We pray it finds you people.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. And speaking of prayer, I think that would be a good thing for us to do. But first, I'd like to say again, thank you to A-Bear for letting us shoot here. Inklings Bookstore in Bartow.
Which is above
the Unfiltered Coffee Shop.
That's right.
Paul, the smartest man in the room, thank you for producing our show.
If you don't think he's the smartest man in the room, just ask him. He will clarify.
He will say, I am.
No, we definitely thank Paul.
Yes. And so, okay, let's pray and we'll call it. Lord, thank you so much for tonight that we can gather and have this conversation. Whoever's listening at any given moment, Lord, we pray that that through our conversation, as we describe friendships and mentorship and value and all these different concepts, Lord, I pray that you would spur on the listener, the viewer, and even in our own hearts, the desire to seek community, to seek people who we can help and can help us to be more like Jesus, to live more for you, and to reject the sinful hearts that we have by nature, and to serve others around us. So thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.